to get it. So I will touch back in with him and see if we can make sense of this.
I want to pause you there for 1 second. I don't think it's a question of anybody being dense. I think it's something else. I have seen this now many times, which is you've got fields which get stuck. I would argue that they get stuck regularly and for evolutionary reasons. But once they are stuck, you're left with everybody inside the field thinking the same incorrect thoughts, and then people on the outside trying to figure out how to break through the deadlock. What the people on the outside inevitably end up having to do in order to break through deadlocks is they end up inventing their own language. In other words, the language that they are handed isn't good enough to solve the problem. So they end up redefining terms. And unfortunately, for most of the people who do this, they forget that they've done it. The language becomes so native to them that when they talk to somebody else, they are using a language that has been partially personalized. And the person they're speaking to imagines that they're speaking gobbledygook because the way they're using terms doesn't add up in a standard framework. And so my best guess would be that, Daniel being the way he is most certainly redefined some things in order for him to do productive work and forgotten how those things, if he uses those terms without clarifying them, how they get heard by others.
Yeah, and we've seen this before. And unfortunately, I always thought that if people are going to do this, they ought to have a personal glossary online so that when you're talking to Daniel or, Jordan or somebody, that when they say X, they actually mean Y, right? At least in mapping it back to standard English.
A glossary is a good idea. And I've toyed with the same idea of writing one for myself. But in practice, what I've seen happen is it takes a couple of weeks of interacting with somebody. If they don't know anything about the topic and you know something and you're teaching them, that's something you can do relatively straightforwardly. Of course, they will pick up your weird terminology and they won't understand why other people don't resonate with it. But if two people have done independent work and then they sit down to compare notes, they will both have personal languages. And it takes a couple of weeks of discussing even relatively mundane things to bring out what these definitions are and what they mean. What I always say when I'm in this situation is, look, I don't need the right to define a particular term. Like if I've redefined the term sympathy or empathy for reasons of making progress with respect to that realm, I don't need the right to define those terms, but I do need the right to have a term that means what I mean when I say that. And either we're going to use my terms for the purpose of the argument, or we're going to come up with some other term. But what I can't be left with is the same blunt objects that everybody else is using. I need some term to mean X. And so anyway, two people who have done this in an adjacent realm take several weeks to learn each other's language. And again and again, I've seen those couple of weeks can be quite contentious because it does feel like you're talking to somebody who doesn't get it. And then ultimately, when you've figured out what they mean by X, Y, and Z and what you mean, it can be very productive. But I don't know of any way to fast forward through that process.
That's actually a very good point. And we've seen this again and again at the Santa Fe Institute, where doing really radical transdisciplinary science is one of our hallmarks. And when we do a workshop where we bring 20 people in from around the world, from many different disciplines to work on a single problem, we basically just assume it'll take at least 3 days, and that's 8-hour days, just to get the terminology straight.
Yep.
So this is a known problem in the sciences, and it's almost certainly a related problem in this area of the future of society. So I think I'll take that personally as a mission to, not argue so hard and rather try to find out what is it the other person's saying, because we know they're not